Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, okay.
It's all me.
Hey, before we go into our comp plan update, Brian's here real quick. We're going to talk about, we've had a fire at the recycling center for the last week or so. Kind of a perfect storm with conditions up there, rain, wind,
Summer heat.
hot.
You wouldn't think that you would have a fire like that with all the rain we had, but all it does is create more heat and steam. But anyway, the fire's out. I know people have been a little bit concerned with the smoke. We've been dealing with, when we started grinding, a couple of breakdowns in between everything that kind of prolonged the process. And another breakdown the other day, Monday, yesterday. But the fire's out, and we are in pretty good shape. And so hopefully nobody will smell any more smoke. They might smell mulch. As we do grind, you do smell mulch. It's a natural, naturally you're going to smell the mulch when we grind, depending on which way the wind blows. But for the most part, there is no fire, and we're taking steps to make sure that we don't have it again. We'll be talking a little bit tomorrow in a budget session, our first one, about how we might do that with equipment and things like that. So just trying to prepare you a little bit.
Right. One of the problems that Brian and Kenny's here and I have talked about is really it's a full-time job for one person, really.
It is.
Should be up there maintaining maintaining the equipment, moving all the materials, and we can't do that anyway.
Right. I mean,
Not big enough.
over the last couple of years since COVID, and people have come and shop around, stayed here, and the building that's going on, the clearing that's going on, we're kind of overwhelmed a little bit, and we don't see it slowing down. So in the past, we used to haul a lot of material off the island, which we had an outlet where it didn't cost us anything, but that had since stopped. So now,
Right.
in tomorrow's work session, budget meeting, we'll talk about that. But we do have to adjust to what's happening, because a lot of townships like us are in the same boat. We have a lot of material we can't get rid of, especially Shelter Island, because obviously where we are, all it does is cost more to get rid of, because we're taking a ferry and we're hauling it someplace.
Right.
We are on top of it, and hopefully we won't see any more fires.
Okay. Right. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to our main topic of the day. We have our comprehensive plan update. Our consulting firm is here. Peg, you want to introduce and get us started?
Sure. This is Noah Levine. He's here from BFJ Consulting, and as Susan is on Zoom, she's going to help with the presentation. And this is a process that we started about 3 years ago. And this past year, the CPAC and the task force, who's BJ, Julia Weisenberg, and myself, have been working on collecting all of the really raw information for all the chapters that our original consultants had proposed back in 2020. And so we've been collecting all of that raw information and kind of putting it together into rough chapter ideas so that when we were able to hire a consultant, because we didn't have any budgetary money for that, we didn't have enough money last year to do it, so we were able to do it for this year, they would have some solid information to work with. The biggest complaint that we heard with the previous consultants was that the plan didn't have an island voice. They didn't have an understanding of the island or the area because they were from Massachusetts and they couldn't really relate. And so we took it kind of on ourselves this last year to try to give it more of an island voice, make sure it had, the island perspective included in it. And because we have, all the base knowledge about where we live, try to make sure that that got incorporated into it. So now we have BFJ on board, and they just started in this year, March, we kind of got rolling. And so we were able to give them everything that we had been working on, and they're working their way through it and helping to put together a draft document. So they're going to give us an update on everything that they've been able to put together so far based on all the information that the CPAC and the task force have given them. And it's all the commentary that we received from the public so far today too.
Great, thank you, Meg. I'm just going to share my screen. Just need to, go ahead. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'll get started. It's great to be here in person. We've been meeting regularly with the task force, now weekly, just to really check in. There's a lot of work to be done to update this document. A lot of work has been done, but in order to kind of get through it all, it really does require checking in. So we're really appreciative to have kind of the feedback from Meg and from BJ, really to keep us on target. And we hope to deliver this document to you on kind of a schedule. And we'll go through some of the steps that we need to take in the next couple of months in order to really, land the plane, as to say. But so today we'll do quick introductions. We'll talk about the progress. We'll talk about some next steps, including seeker, which is mandatory, of course. And then the bulk of the presentation will be an overview of the findings, goals, and recommendations of the plan. It's a fairly lengthy presentation, so we'll stop along the way if you have questions. Also, I'm joined by Susan Fafadi. I'll just do, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself. Again, Noah Levine from BFJ Planning. And I, do understand that, you brought in our expertise. We do a lot of comprehensive plans in New York State, throughout the region, but also a lot on Long Island. We finished the comprehensive plan for Southampton Village last year. We're working in Riverhead on their comprehensive plan. My family also lives in Sag Harbor, so I'm very familiar with the area. Susan and I work hand in hand on comprehensive plans throughout the region. She's also an editor, so this process has been fairly good. That's because a lot of it is kind of editing a lot of the work that's previously done. But Susan, sorry, you want to introduce yourself?
I think you did a great job, Noah, and I know it's a long presentation, so I'll let you get going.
Okay, but we also do have a deep team. I just mentioned Emily Juncker and Jonathan Martin, who are involved, as well as others we can pull in as resources when needed. Many of you know that this process has been a couple of years in the making. It's our understanding that it started in 2020 when the plan was initiated, as Meg pointed out. There were extensive meetings with the CPAC, also with community. There were community meetings at that time. When that process ended, Meg and BJ and Julia really kind of took the initiative to develop those chapters. And then we started in the spring to really hone in on those chapters, focus in on kind of the important elements and really crafting a document that could be utilized by the town. During the process, we've had regular meetings with the task force. We've also attended meetings by the CPAC. The meetings that we weren't able to attend, we watched the recordings. So we have been tracking that closely. And we are going to have 2 public meetings upcoming in the next month or so, which I'll get into. So we really want to make sure that we check in with the community to make sure that what we're proposing is on target. This slide really just kind of summarizes that. It kind of just goes through what we've been doing over the summer, which is largely editing the chapters, also kind of preparing for the public outreach and the seeker process. So with regard to public outreach, we have set a date for our first public workshop, which would be virtual. We have done many virtual workshops of this kind. We can handle crowds of over 100 people. We just would kind of do it in a different way. What we propose to do is basically do a presentation that might be a version of what we do today. And then we will break up the group into smaller roundtable groups virtually, where we could have smaller group discussions to talk about ideas, whether we're on target, to answer questions. And then those smaller groups would be pushed back into a larger group. And so the idea with this first virtual public workshop it would give us a chance to test these ideas so that we could refine the actual document before we post it for public review. We hope to do that as early as possible. We plan to do it by September 15th, if not earlier. And that will give the public a little bit of time to preview it before our workshop, which we propose to have on Saturday, September 23rd. We were talking about Saturday because we thought maybe that might get a little bit of a bigger turnout than a night meeting. We're flexible, but it was just a thought. We want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, and that might be, a more opportune time, particularly for those people who come out on the weekends and so on. That would basically be a presentation followed by kind of workstations where we would be there in person to talk about various ideas. It's kind of more of an open house style. And then after that, we would revise the document, submit it to you, and begin the kind of revisions and seeker process. Again, I've kind of already described the public workshop. We're working with Meg and others to publicize the documents. We certainly want to get the word out, but the information is all available on the town's website. Also, another idea that came up is the possibility of some kind of photo, either contest or submissions. I'm going to actually go out after this to take pictures. It's not a great day, but we also know that many in the community probably have photos of really great attributes, great things that are that symbolize, what Shelter Island is. And so we would encourage residents to participate. I don't think an email hasn't gone out
It hasn't gone out yet, because I was seeing if we could give out a prize, but the prize is really going to be that your photo will be incorporated into the comprehensive plan. And we'll make Coco the point person. So anyone who has photos that you want to see in the comprehensive plan, email them to Coco. She's on the website, and we'll send out an email blast about this or a social media thing. And then just include the photograph, your name, and a brief description of what it is. That way, we can kind of put them all together and have some
Maybe some type
content.
of guidance of what type of photos generally that you're looking for?
Yeah, we'll put all that together, but essentially, you'll have the headings for all the chapters, and it'll be photographs that pertain to some of the chapters, to events that we've had, to, because all of these things are in the plan. So we have a lot of conversations about, CPF properties, so photos of CPF properties, or, some of the events like the rubber duck race, the 10K, things like that. We're trying to find photos that reflect the island that we can put in the comp plan so people get a feel for everything.
No, would you prefer questions as we go along, or you're?
Yeah, sure. I think so, yeah.
Since we just stopped for one. I want to go back to the public workshop.
Yeah.
When we go into breakout groups, who
Yeah.
should be running the breakout groups?
So it would be myself, Susan, Meg, and BJ, I think. Depending on how many people, that would essentially, I think 15 people, give or take, is a good number for each individual breakout group. And then if we need more, we have other staff members that will be there to kind of manage the Zoom meeting. So we are fairly deep if we have a sense of how many people will attend. If we expect more than that, we'll just need to make sure we staff up for it. But I would say we can handle at least a crowd of 60 with 4 people, but we can bring more.
Yeah. It's essentially like the way we did it the first round when we had.
Yeah, I mean, we had a good turnout.
We
so
did.
I think there could be a number of breakout groups.
Okay,
I can look and historically
Yeah.
see how many people showed up.
okay.
The Saturday, where is that going to be held?
The Legion,
The Legion?
yeah, well, the community center.
There you go.
We've already reserved that building.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so seeker, everyone's favorite topic. So there are a couple of things that we need to do now to keep the ball moving forward. We have given the town board the documents to declare yourselves as, or the intent to be lead agency. The town board is the only agency that can adopt a plan. It's really more of a formality, but it's safer to declare your intent. We'll send the notice to Suffolk County and then also to the planning board as interested agencies. Suffolk County will need to also schedule with them. They'll need to schedule a review of the actual document once we have a draft, but it helps to put it on their radar. Within 30 days, you'll be in a position to, you'll be lead agency, and then we can kind of begin that process. In October, as I mentioned before, we hope to give you a draft plan. that's when you would set the date for the public hearing. And we're looking to November and December to have those public hearings and then to complete the secret process. So that's kind of our rough timeline for how this kind of might transpire. Any questions?
That's the Suffolk County Planning Commission?
The Suffolk County, yep, exactly. Okay, so we're going to go through preliminary findings, goals, and recommendations. I'm going to start and then I'm going to pass it to Susan because there's a lot to go through. Each of the slides, a lot of the recommendations have multiple bullet points. We might not kind of go over every single one of them, but we can certainly circle back to talk about them. The one thing I do want to mention about the plan is our approach to editing the document was to focus on a document that was really focused on action items. And so we did receive a lot of action items. And what we did was kind of go in and really provide a little bit more meat, more substance to those as we're writing the document. It's still in a working draft form, but just as an overall approach, we're looking to create a document for you that is really working, that's a useful document. So this slide shows an overview of the chapters that we propose to include. Introduction and vision, growth and change, which is demographics and socioeconomics, the built environment, which goes through land use and zoning, housing, and the economy. And those two chapters really are linked together. Transportation, the natural environment, and water quality. Water quality was such an important issue that we kind of felt that this was the best place to put it because a lot of water quality issues do dovetail with natural environment issues. And then waterways in the next chapter really seemed to be more about use of the water, the recreational use of the water mostly. And so that seemed to kind of work well in a parks and open space chapter. We have quality of life, which talks about historic and cultural resources as well as government services, utilities, and this should be, instead of transportation, should be sustainability, resilience, and then the future land use plan, which is basically a kind of a list of recommendations and specific things to move the plan forward. We do have a vision in the document, which was adapted, slightly tweaked from what was done before. There were 4 principles that we worked with the task force on. I'll just read them. There is a larger vision, but it's maybe too much to read. The first principle was to exercise responsible stewardship of the natural and cultural resources which give the island its special character and significance. This does include water quality issues. Second was to increase the resiliency of the islands to climate change and sea level rise by implementing appropriate adaptation measures. The third was to maintain a vibrant year-round island community that meets residents' economic and social needs. And the fourth was to motivate and enable upcoming generations to be part of Shelter Island's future. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Susan to talk about some of the demographic and socioeconomic things, and I'm just going to rest my voice for a little bit.
Great, thank you, Noah. And so we're going to take you through the remaining chapters that we covered, that Noah covered on the previous slides. Each one will give just a few punchy takeaways, and then the actual recommendations, so you can kind of see how the existing additions links with the recommendations. So when we look at demographics and socioeconomic trends, we've really done a deep dive through all of the data that is out there, and I think a lot of this is probably apparent to all of you who know it so well. But this is what the data sort of tells us, is that your population has definitely grown on a year-round basis. When you look at the graph on the right, you can see that on a percentage basis, Shelter Island's growth in the past 10 years is pretty high compared to its neighbors. Obviously, you have a small base to start from, but that does show you that the population is continuing to grow, and it has changed a bit over time. We know that it is very seasonal, and that's not new, that there is a population boom during the summer, and the county has put that number at about 12,000 people. It's heavily seasonal, but that COVID really has changed a lot. And I think anecdotally, we've definitely been hearing that. You've all seen that. Just heard about some of the impacts of more and more people coming out. The data, it's a little bit tricky to sort of suss that out in terms of the census. It's not really a clear picture yet, but we do know that there will likely be lingering impacts, that some of those remote work and hybrid work arrangements will continue, and we can expect that to affect the long term. So that's definitely shifting kind of who is out here and how long they stay. Okay. So next slide. So when you look at, again, ongoing shifts of the year-round population, the population is getting older for sure. It looks like the island is attracting more singles, empty nesters, fewer families, more residents living alone. A lot of that is typical for the region, but I think you're seeing it as well. Some of those people who perhaps came out during COVID and are staying. And you see that as well in the next few slides, just how this is changing. The island's population has become more diverse. It has become a little bit less predominantly white Caucasian, and the Hispanic population has grown significantly on a percentage basis. Obviously still a small baseline for those populations. Household income overall has increased. And you see that at the graph at the bottom, you see just the significant, orange bar all the way at the right, but you also see growth in the lower income side as well. So there is an increase in households that are making below the median income of just under 112,000. So you kind of see either end growing in terms of household income. Okay. Looking at the school enrollment, I think this is very consistent with, a decline in families and population that is aging. You do see a continued long-term trend of shrinking school age enrollment. That was a sort of a slight uptick during the pandemic, where we saw people perhaps coming out for a couple years and they put their kids in the school system, but that has largely mitigated, and we think is sort of back on track to the long-term, decline in enrollment, which you see here. Okay, so that really is kind of a baseline in terms of socioeconomics that really drives the next couple chapters, housing and economy. As Noah said, those are closely linked. But before I dive into these, I'm just going to pause if there are any questions. We're going to take questions at the end too, but any questions on what we just presented?
Is chapter 3 missing?
So
No.
chapter 3 is, I believe it's the socioeconomic chapter. Is that correct, Noah?
Built environment land use.
Yeah, so it's just,
built
just
environment.
for this meeting, it's not missing. I just didn't seem as pertinent to talk about the issues. The zoning and the land use really is more of an existing conditions of the zoning. We wanted to kind of focus on like the trends, and there wasn't as much to say, I guess, in that chapter. We also have been working on really refining the land use map. And we kind of wanted to jump to, the recommendations, I guess.
And you'll see the land use and zoning kind of pop up in various other chapters as well, including housing, economy, and open space. Okay. So when we look at housing, again, this is sort of really segueing from the economics, the socioeconomics. Most of the housing, as you all know, is single family. Most of it is occupied by owners. And most of the residentially zoned land, which is the majority of the island, is actually owned by off-island residents or taxpayers. And I think you all, again, know this, you just heard it, that there has been a steady influx of new construction, new development in single-family housing. And those newer homes are perhaps shifting from the past. They're bigger, they tend to be more expensive. They're serving perhaps a different market than they did historically. Okay. So that's kind of the overall trend here. And this is a land use issue that affects housing as well. We know that much of the island has been preserved through land conservation. It's been highly effective at preserving those natural and important resources, but there are challenges with that as well. Land is becoming more expensive, so that becomes more difficult to preserve in the future. It just becomes more costly, right? And also prices are being driven up sort of across the board. So housing is also becoming more expensive. And we do anticipate that development pressure will continue. Lots of folks want to be here, and that we can expect that there'll be more pressure to build residences as well. But that there are infrastructure limitations, the nature of this island, just in terms of traffic, utilities. There's still a fair amount of development potential here, as we know. About 15% of the island is still considered vacant and zoned for residential use. So that definitely still creates an opportunity for future development. Just something to keep in mind when we think about zoning for the future. Okay. So again, more key findings. We know when we're looking at employment, which is closely tied to housing, it really historically and still it has been centered around service economy, serving both the year-round residents, but also in particular the seasonal summer residents, that is driving a lot of the employment on the island. And because of that, because of the nature of those employment centers, a lot of those businesses are employing people who live off island and have to commute via ferry. And so that really creates a bit of a mismatch in terms of where people work versus where they live. And there are obviously very significant affordability concerns when it comes to housing. So the town did complete earlier this year a community housing plan, which we have looked at and incorporated many of its recommendations. There's a lot of meat in there to really get at, kind of a long-term vision for enhancing affordability.
Susan, you should mention that the community housing plan would be incorporated as an appendix, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. We've brought in a lot of the recommendations, but we're also going to actually append it to the plan itself. Okay. So moving on from the key findings now to goals and recommendations. And as Noah said, we're going to try our best not to read all of these, but the first kind of major goal is really preserving the quality of the existing residential neighborhoods. So thinking about the scale of future development, the knockdown houses that we're seeing and ways to control that, and also things that affect quality of life in the residential neighborhoods, like illegal conversions and short-term rentals, looking at ways to better control those aspects. Okay. And the next one looks at, again, more deeply on the nature of future housing construction, making sure that it's sensitive to the existing environment, and that it's also high quality and is consistent with what you're seeing or what you have seen in the existing neighborhoods. So a lot of this looks at, limitations on future development in terms of the scale, in terms of the developability of non-conforming small lots, particularly as they are in sensitive environmental areas. Limits on density, and then looking at future subdivision, which is where a lot of your opportunities may lie for future development. So again, not trying to stop future development, but just making sure that it's well controlled so that it is consistent with the existing context. Okay. Looking more at affordable housing, again, this is really leaning heavily on the community housing plan. There's a lot of great recommendations in there. One key recommendation here is to keep that plan updated as time goes on a consistent basis, and then looking at different types of housing that might be, even if it's not necessarily deed restricted affordable, but might be more affordable by its nature. Things like accessory dwelling units or apartments that are above ground floor retail in your business zones. Really just trying to expand the overall housing options. And again, continuing with that goal, looking at actually producing new affordable housing or community housing through things like a land trust and then low interest loan program for first-time home buyers. Again, just expanding the opportunities that are out there. Okay, so I'm going to pause on housing. Any questions on that chapter? Okay, we'll move on then. Economy, again, very closely linked to housing and land use. So when you look at this zoning map, you can see that there is a fairly small concentration of where your business zones are. They are really limited to a few key corridors, and you see in red here. And we do find when we look at the zoning that in many cases, the existing zoning isn't really matching up necessarily with the land use patterns. So that's definitely something that we've taken a look at in terms of the future zoning recommendations. Okay. Looking at kind of who's working and where and how that affects the island. We do see that even before the pandemic, there was a significant growth in the number of both self-employed workers and those who were working from home, and that there are long-term implications of that. We are seeing throughout the region as people are sort of around more during the day. It's actually a positive for a lot of local downtowns that there's more possibility for those people to patronize businesses during the day when previously they might have been off island at work. So that's definitely creating a long-term shift here. At the same time, we know that because of the sort of historical service economy, The island does sort of lack a cohesive network of the business community. And we also know that the legacy industries that have been part of the island's history in terms of aquaculture and maritime businesses, really do have still potential to provide local jobs and be an important part of the local economy. Okay, so when we look at our overall goals, this is a bit of a land use and zoning related recommendation. It's really just strengthening the overall commercial areas. And there are lots of ways to do that. One way is looking at zoning, potentially merging your two business districts, and then also creating some design guidelines for future buildings or even changes to existing buildings so that you're getting business development that is consistent and high quality. And you can see some examples here on the right of kind of the good ways to do things with parking kind of at the side and the rear, and then maybe the less desirable with the parking lot out in front. So design guidelines would start to create that sort of long-term look. And then we do also see a need for more hamlet scaled business zoning that perhaps is a new zoning district, particularly in the Heights and Bridge Street area. Okay. Thinking about your workers who are on the island, and again, how to kind of create more of that cohesive business environment. A lot of that is related to infrastructure, so high-speed internet, and really making sure that that's available and reasonably priced. Working with the chamber, sort of strengthening the, sort of local network, including things like group health plan potential, and then, increasing that potential connection between the educational district or educational system and the local business community as well through things like an apprenticeship program. Okay, and then again, thinking about your legacy industries, continuing to support those agriculture and aquaculture industries, protecting them through things like zoning, and also thinking about leasing municipally owned underwater properties for aquaculture opportunities. Okay, so I'm going to pause on economy. If you think of anything, we'll definitely have questions at the end. So this is not the only opportunity.
Yeah, I'd
Yes.
like to ask a question too.
It's only for the board.
We'll have the question.
Public comment at the end.
That's what
At
I.
the end.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Any board questions? It's hard for me to see. Okay. So we'll move on to transportation then. Okay. So again, not telling you things that you probably don't already know, but ferries clearly are an essential component of your daily life on Shelter Island. It's important that they remain supported and available to everyone who needs them. That being said, we know that many parts of the transportation network, including ferries, are vulnerable to sea level rise and future flooding. So it's just something to think about in terms of adaptation. At the same time, on the road network, we know that given the changes in development, vehicular traffic has grown, and that overall there's just a need for greater transportation options, particularly people who are commuting from off island. Okay. Looking a little bit more closely at the road network, we know that the island is challenged because some of the roads are owned by jurisdictions not under the town's authority, like the state. Which just requires more coordination and collaboration with those other agencies. We see that safety is a really high priority, especially for non-vehicular users, pedestrians and bikes, for example. And when we see that bicycling is very popular, I'm sure you see them all the time, cyclists in the roadways, but there is very limited dedicated infrastructure for bicycling. And in many cases, a lot of the roadways also are inadequate for pedestrian infrastructure as well. So that does create some safety questions that we want to look at. Okay, so when we look at goals and recommendations, one key goal is really to design what we call complete streets. And by that, we mean streets that are really designed and safe for all users and all abilities. And that includes drivers, but obviously as well, pedestrians and bicyclists too. And so there's a range of recommendations that could further that overall goal, ranging from a complete streets policy to specific actions like speed limit changes, and then coordinating with DOT on bicycle lanes on Route 114, as well as expanded sidewalks in key areas to improve safety. Okay. We recognize that many people still are going to be driving, and we want to make sure that the roadway is efficient and that it's something that is invested in over time. So There's some recommendations here about improving the infrastructure itself, for example, shoulders, maintenance of vegetation along the roadways, an ongoing capital maintenance and improvement plan, and then addressing stormwater runoff as well as spillover traffic from the ferries. Okay. Looking at expanding the overall transportation options, again, to serve those people who are coming from off island. One of the recommendations here is to explore a passenger-only launch, looking at the feasibility of a potential jitney service, which would provide transportation just around the island, and then making sure that we're supporting sustainable transportation alternatives like electric vehicle charging stations. Okay, so I'm going to pause there on any transportation questions from the board before I hand it back to Noah. Okay.
Can we not?
At the end.
I'm just going to move through because there's a lot of content, and we'll certainly circle back to any of the chapters as needed. So this chapter is natural resources and water quality. Water quality was probably the most important issue that we heard from many of the residents from review of the materials as well as reports and conversations with the CPAC. We understand that this issue it's a sensitive issue. Water quality is highly vulnerable to contamination, and there are significant actions that are needed to preserve it, actions that are needed in both the short term and the long term. The island also has many ecological resources of statewide significance, so that's a consideration. And then, of course, the island is susceptible to invasive species that have major ecological, public health, and economic impacts. Climate change, as Susan mentioned earlier, climate change really does affect a lot of different things, but it's expected to bring more frequent droughts, an increase in storms and flooding. And then sea level rise is something that we really need to address and identify those areas in the most risk-prone areas. As you know, the island recently completed the ground and surface water management plan. We propose to include this document as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. We have incorporated many of the recommendations. Some ways we kind of consolidated them to provide more of a narrative, but the document really does support the recommendations that are in that plan. And that plan really should be the kind of the primary source for recommendations having to do with ground and surface water management. However, some that we highlighted in thinking about wastewater and water supply infrastructure, one could be to consider the possibility of an island-wide wastewater management district or local community districts, continuing to investigate methods to treat effluents from the municipal buildings in the town center, working with the Shelter Highland Heights Property Owners Corporation to upgrade their sewer plants, provide service potentially to other areas, or explore other methods to dispose of effluent. And then also thinking about a long-term plan for public water utility service. And this is a project that would really require a phased approach, but the first step would be to thinking about where this could be and just kind of jump-starting the planning phase. The next step is really working with property owners on ways to prevent contamination of private water wells so that they can help them safeguard their drinking water. One of these, it was education, of course, but also encouraging testing of the wells and sharing that data so that the town can help to monitor those resources. That could include some kind of an incentive program to get that data so that the town can establish better maps of groundwater quality. This could also include grants for IA systems, as well as zoning to protect wellhead areas. Other town regulations to protect groundwater include implementing source water protection programs, which identify vulnerable areas, such as around wells. Again, revisiting the town's IA code, addressing the issues and risks of underground fuel oil storage, which present risks, and implementing water use restrictions as established by the WAC. Other things that can be done to protect surface waters include reducing the discharge of VOCs and other contaminants through education and town code modification, providing upland stormwater infrastructure to control runoff. This could be barrels to collect water at rain spouts, other green infrastructure techniques to collect water along roadways, and so on. And then, of course, continuing to monitor the health of surface waters. Generally speaking, there are a number of measures to restore habitats, such as tidal and freshwater wetlands, as well as upland areas. This could include the adoption of a tree preservation local law, and then also engaging New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and other local resources to explore a controlled burning program, which really requires a tremendous amount of coordination to do. Of course, nuisance species are an issue, such as deer and ticks. So the town should continue those efforts, which really include both education and monitoring and working with regional agencies to implement best practices in these areas. So I'll pause there before we move on. Any questions about that chapter? Okay. Parks, open space, and waterways. As I mentioned before, the waterways really seem to fit into this chapter. We do have a lot of data about the waterways, which really appear to be busier each year. We have read through a number of the recommendations, and it looks like access for boats is limited. There are very few opportunities for moorings, anchorages, and town landings. And so one thing the town can do is to start to look at making areas more efficient. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Another issue was seaplane traffic, which is a growing concern. Also, we understand that East Hampton is considering, we're in the process of closing its airport. And so we want to kind of keep an eye on that to make sure that it doesn't include air traffic on the island. With regard to recommendations, the first big goal is to comprehensively plan for use and protection of waterfront and waterways. And one of the big recommendations here is to develop a local waterfront revitalization plan, an LWRP. And what that document really does is it's a planning document similar to a comprehensive plan, but it's one that really focuses on the water areas. Once adopted by the town and the state, it becomes the state's policy for use of the water. So it really helps to align local actions and state actions, and it also helps to develop community priorities with regard to use of the water. So it's one thing that we think could be very helpful, particularly to address a lot of the things that I'll talk about below, such as developing a plan for moorings that could be done as part of an LWRP. The next goal is to continue to work with the county, other towns, and groups to maintain navigable channels to ensure safe passage, preserve vistas, sustain marine life, and enable recreation use. This includes the continuation and expansion of dredging projects where needed, protection of certain sensitive resources such as Real Point and Shell Beach, and then really preventing kind of overuse or high speeds in the water navigable areas to make sure that those areas are enjoyable for all that use waters. The next goal is this is a continuation. This also talks about policies that address some of these various elements, such as limiting seaplane activity, the use of beaches by off-road vehicles, a marine business zone, establishment of new docks, boat lifts, bulkheads, etc. So that while the comprehensive plan doesn't necessarily specifically identify specific recommendations for each of these, we understand that they are concerns and should be looked at further once the comprehensive plan is complete. Also, town landings, we understand that there's a need for a maintenance schedule just to make sure that those are continually monitored and upgraded where needed. And then providing resources to other town organizations like the CAC and the WMAC for community education and communication. So pause there. Questions? Okay. The quality of life chapter really brings in a number of various chapters or kind of topics. As I said before, historic preservation, community resources, cultural resources, public health, and governance. With regard to historic preservation and the visual landscape, the first goal is to safeguard and communicate Shelter Island's unique history and identity. And that could include the activation and staffing of the Historical Advisory Commission. It's our understanding that this has actually been established in town code, but there isn't an active commission. So that would be a logical first step. And we would outline ways to kind of get that started. There may be an opportunity for a historic district zone. And then, of course, there's a need to continue to maintain and preserve historic records. That can be done in town hall and really make sure that those have more longevity and are digitized. With regard to historic preservation, the next goal is to protect the island's small town way of life, the rural character, and natural resources. And this really has to deal with other quality of life kind of nuisances, such as excessive noise, excessive lighting would really kind of be a nuisance for the rural and bucolic quality that we enjoy in Shelter Island. The next goal talks about ensuring an efficient, effective, and transparent town government. There are a number of things that we've identified. One is the potential to increase government capacity for planning and implementation of comprehensive plan items, of other items, to make sure that these are carried forward. Developing a facilities master plan for town-owned sites in the town center and beyond. Improving record-keeping technologies, and then also utilizing new tools for communication and transparency, both for government processes, but also with the public. For cultural resources, one of the principles that we mentioned earlier was the need to promote volunteerism and really support people to become more involved in town activities. This includes maintaining and promoting volunteerism for the ambulance and fire department members. Also, expanding recreation department coordination with the library and senior center programming, really to maximize the coordination and cooperation of those various programs and departments. For public health, this goal is improve access to goods and services to help the island be a more resilient and less dependent community. As Susan mentioned earlier, Shelter Island is getting older on average. And so we need to recognize that and think about supporting expansion of services for the senior population, addressing food insecurity, as well as continuing tick-borne disease monitoring and reduction. Any questions about quality of life? Okay, this is the last chapter. Utilities, sustainability, and resilience. Of course, we know that the island being an island, it's vulnerable to many different things, but in particular, the electric and communication infrastructure is vulnerable. So investment is needed, especially in light of climate change impacts. There also, with regard to sustainability and long-term resilience, there are a limited number of green energy installations. So one thing would be to promote renewable and environmentally responsible utilities. That could include establishing a small group to investigate means of creating more energy independence, encouraging the use of renewable energy sources. One of those could be evaluating the use of geothermal energy and encouraging heat pump installations where appropriate. And then also taking action against climate change by reducing energy consumption and promoting sustainable patterns of development. And that could include promoting sustainable construction and design standards, continuing to improve the energy efficiency of town facilities, and then also developing a coastal resilience plan. This talks about community facilities and really addressing and ensuring that they provide adequate service over time in a fiscally efficient way. We did hear earlier about issues with composting and recycling. That's kind of included here. where we will really need to continue to improve the recycling center and waste management systems. That could include appointing a town recycling coordinator to help in those efforts, and then also hardening and improving communication systems throughout town. So wait, before I kind of move on to the next steps, any questions on infrastructure? Okay.
I do have one question. You're saying that's the last chapter, but on the overview of chapters, there was chapter 11, future land use plan and implementation.
Yeah, so the future land use plan will essentially be a summary of all of those recommendations. It'll kind of, it's really more of an executive summary of recommendations that the town could use as a to-do list. So it will be duplicative to some degree of work that's been done in prior chapters. So I just didn't want to kind of rehash it again.
And the other chapter, that's the zoning chapter, that one's not finished yet because we've been going through all the assessor's data and updating the land use mapping and trying to get all of that correct before we rolled out that information. And we didn't want to wait too long before showing the board what has been worked on to date. So, we'll have an update with the zoning when that's complete.
The next slide just talks about next steps. As I mentioned before, we are looking forward to our virtual meeting on August 24th. We'll work with the town to really get the word out in as many ways as we can. There's a flyer. We really do want to make sure that people know about it. But also we will record that meeting so people can watch it in their own time. The presentation will be similar to what we did today. We'll try and make it a little bit more interactive during the meeting with kind of live polls so that it isn't, so it's a little bit more interesting for people. We're looking forward to that. Once that's done, we will kind of really put our heads down and work on the draft chapters. Of course, the photo submissions, and then working towards our in-person meeting on September 23rd. And then after that, we will hopefully be able to take those comments and finalize the document for submission to the town board.
So Meg, I think a lot of these components all lead to zoning.
Right.
So when can we expect, I don't think it'll be the virtual meeting of the 24th, but we'll have it for the draft present to the public.
It'll definitely be in the draft document, but if it's ready before then, we could do another work session presentation for just the zoning portion.
Okay, any questions from the town board?
No, just a comment. Very comprehensive. I love the way that it's broken down by chapters. Provides us and future town boards with a wonderful, wonderful roadmap. I think for all those people that are very skeptical out there about the lack of a need for a comprehensive plan, and you've got your head in the sand. This is clearly, there's a lot of meat and potatoes in this presentation. Some sound recommendations, and it should generate, in my estimation, a lot of positive movement for this town board and future town boards for the next decade. And finally, my only comment is that during that presentation, there were so many things that you said that we are very much aware of, that we have been working on, but there's some new, different approaches to things that we haven't really thought about that this thing brings to light. So I'm very impressed with the presentation. And, to me, it should be a very useful document in terms of moving forward. And thank you for your hard work.
And we do, thank you. And we do recognize there's some new ideas, and we hope to work them out with you. And we understand that I would say 90% of it was done before, but just from our experience in other areas, there's certainly some things that kind of stuck out as some things that you might want to consider. And we can work through some of those ideas if they don't make sense. We've no pride in authorship, but just some ideas to think about.
And this is a very brief overview, because when the actual recommendations come out, there's a lot more text to them. These are just the concepts, but then it branches out and it explains kind of some of the background on why the recommendation is made and some of the ways to achieve it. So with a lot of the recommendations, the CPAC really went through them and kind of thought through sort of the detail of the recommendation. So that's included in the actual document. This is just such a brief overview to give you an idea of what's been going on over the last few years and kind of what it's coming to.
Is there any way you could just, again, give a timeline and the opportunities for public comment?
Sure. Well, I had it in the last slide, but essentially, we have a public meeting on the 24th. And we won't have a draft document at that point, but we will have a presentation that will be provided online. People can comment on the presentation, they can watch the meeting today. After that public meeting, we will post the draft documents. We will try to do it as early as possible, but I said kind of no later than September 15th, which will be a little bit more than a week before the public meeting. At that public meeting, we will be able to take comment at that meeting, and we will incorporate those comments and give you a draft in October. I guess the last thing to determine would be, we'd kind of need a drop dead point so we could kind of give you a document. So we need to determine how long after the public meeting we'd take comment. But I will say that is not the last opportunity. There will be a public hearing, so there's still opportunities for public comment. But just as far as before we kind of give you the document, we need to kind of have a deadline. So I would say probably the first week in October would probably be the end of kind of that phase of comments.
Okay, and then, like you said, there's going to be a public hearing in connection with the adoption.
Right.
Of this comprehensive plan by the town board.
Right.
So there's going to be another bite at the apple for public comment at that point.
Yeah.
All right, so there's written avenues, right?
Right. The comments section on the website is always open. So
Okay.
people can go in and post their comments online. So if you go to the town page, hit the comprehensive plan button, and then there's another button that says your comments here. Click that, and then you can add your comments. And those, they get sent directly to us. So you can add comments that way, you can email them in. And then the public workshops are going to be a good way to get comments into.
Since this is a big document, will chapters get posted as they're finalized rather than just presenting the whole document at once?
We can do that. We can talk about it if you. I think my only concern is that so many of them are interrelated, but we can certainly post them as they're done.
Just think it gives people more time to digest and read through everything.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not opposed to that idea, or maybe in tranches like chapters 1 through 3 and then chapters 4 through 7 or something like
Yeah, I
that.
think that would be advisable. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot to digest in.
It is a lot.
One of those chapters. My only other comment is, BJ's not here, but Meg is. Thank you very, very much for the hundreds and hundreds of hours that you guys have spent on this. Thank you to you guys for your input. Thank you to the committee, and thank you to the dozens and dozens and dozens of residents that have taken the time and the effort to participate in the process, because without them, none of this could get done. So thank you very, very much, all three of you.
We've had good participation. We've had over 116 comments come in through the comment portal. And BJ and I have been meeting with all the different homeowners associations. And we only have less than a handful of homeowners associations left to meet with. And so we've gotten a lot of very good feedback from the community that we've been able to incorporate. It's been good.
Okay, rather than adjourn the meeting for a special meeting on the moratorium exemption, we're going to open up the questions now for the, so if you have to come up and identify yourself.
My name is Lily Hoffman, and for the last 3 years, I've been a member of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. And I want to state that since the hiring of EFJ, we've had no contact with the firm. The entire the conversation has taken place between the task force, Meg and BJ, and it has been a political agenda by a lame duck administration recommendations that we have argued about and made, including my own, have not been incorporated in any way, shape, or form in this plan. The plan, for example, and in contrast to the last plan, which is our current plan, 1994, does not say that water quantity is an issue, that there are constraints that require conservation. It talks about quality, contamination, and fixing it up. It talks about wastewater and public water. The potential here, affordable housing is another issue. ADUs, accessory dwelling units, have been promoted up the kazoo on this island. They're going to double, if everyone creates one, there's going to be double units on every property on the island. None of this is necessarily affordable. In fact, it isn't. It's market rate housing. So I want to make the point that I find myself strongly upset and really feeling very, very hurt by the hundreds of hours I've put in, and not to have our thoughts, several of us on the committee and many, many of us in the community, listened to. And we have not had a chance to get together and talk about any of this with your firm. Thank you.
I just want to say something very quickly.
Identify yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Patricia Fulcrot. I own the Gallery in the Heights, Shelter on an Art House. I don't know many of you very well. I came here in '69, disappeared to LA, and came back a few years ago. I have been in politics a long time in LA, and what struck me was a lot of your recommendations are to protect the island, and a lot of them are to expand it quite a lot. That's a juxtaposition that's really difficult to manage. And what I want to know, where is the code for how many trees you can take down when you build a house? You have one line in there that says tree preservation. What does that mean? I walked out this morning, I couldn't come to the hearing. There's a private house that's being built across from the post office. There was a permit sign. I didn't make the hearing. It is one of the most extraordinary natural bird sanctuaries. It is gone as of yesterday, gone. And there are no trees, and there is no code for how many trees you can take down when you build something. Look out the window. This island is about trees. Climate, a guy in LA owns Tree People. They planted 1 million trees in LA. The number one thing of protecting climate for yourself and climate change is having a canopy. That's it. And this is an island that is known for its trees and its birds, and there's no code for what you can do and not do. And I brought it up and I was told, oh, that's the building department. I don't know who hired the building department, but I would guess you guys had something to do with it. How can you plan and talk about October? You know how many trees are going to be down between now and October? So that's my comment. And
Before we continue the comments, can we keep them to today's presentation?
yes, tree presentation.
Questions for the presentation.
Jerry said tree preservation.
And
My
that will be
question is,
addressed.
what does it mean?
Being addressed. We
actually have a
addressed it in a
committee.
work session, and it will be addressed when
Okay,
we have
will
the
the
public.
committee look at the trees that are gone on that corner? Come on.
Let her speak.
These are
This isn't the
ideas.
place for that.
What?
You brought it, right now is not the time.
Okay, I brought it up. You don't have a tree code. I don't see it in the presentation. You know, I don't feel like getting angry to save a bird.
The recommendation is to develop a code to protect the trees. That's what the
Develop is the
recommendation.
key word. They're taking them down as we speak.
Anita Greenbaum Brush. I represent the Menantic Peninsula Association. I've been here for many years. My question for the town board is, what's the rush? This is a very comprehensive plan. And I would say that despite the fact that Meg and BJ came to our annual meeting. Very few people in the Monantic area understand that a comprehensive plan is being developed right now. I think people gave comments to them because they thought the town board would hear their comments about issues that are important to us. All of this, what you presented, is thorough and interesting, but even to people who pay attention, it will take a long time to digest it. So my question is, what's the rush? And I guess my comment is, give yourselves and us more time. Thank you.
Anita, my personal response to that is, this has been a process that started 4 years ago. There was an interruption, but it's continued again. Where has the public been for input in it all along? I don't think we're rushing anything. I think what we're doing is putting together a plan for the public to address. I don't think anything's written in stone. It's not code. It's for the future town board to address in code. How do we address this? How do we put legislation in place for this? What we're addressing now is a plan for the town.
I think it's great that a plan is being developed. I think it's great. I think it's important. And I'm glad that you're working on it. I just feel like it's just really starting to penetrate people's consciousness now. And if you want town input, which I think you do, it feels rushed to me. And I'm in favor of this plan, but it just feels rushed.
My feeling, anybody that knows me, is that it's very easy to talk about things. You can talk till you're blue in the face, but you have to start somewhere to do something. And this town board, or the previous town board 4 years ago, said we're going to start the comprehensive plan process. We started it. Again, it hit a snag, it stopped. This town board said, let's continue it. And that's what we're doing.
I agree.
We're not going to stop just because there's going to be an election in November. We're going to continue, and it gets as far as it gets. Excuse me? We lost 2 years because of COVID. That's the reality. We lost 2 years because of COVID. No, we have 4 years and, okay.
Lost two.
Bill,
If I can come up for a second.
identify yourself, please.
Bill Mastro, I'd ask one thing, can we take the temperature down just a little bit?
I agree, thank you.
Because people both here and up here care. So let's accept that there's caring. I give you, Meg, tremendous amount of credit for the amount of work you've put in. I do want to reinforce something Anita said, though. I don't think that the asking for more time or what's the rush is trying to stop the process. There is a question right now of the plan is really coming out in October. Why does it have to be approved by December? Maybe it'll work in terms of a timetable, but to put that timetable out now is a little presumptuous. Right now, let's see what happens. Let's see what the feedback is in terms of the action items that are there. I mean, on the very mind thing, I'm very happy to put 30 miles per hour into the transportation part. But there are real issues. And then the other question would be, what's the next step in terms of secret? That would be my question. You're going to approve yourself as the agency, but then who are you going to hire? And will that work in that time frame? So I don't think if people ask, oh, is this being rushed, that they're necessarily acting in bad faith. They're looking at the time frame and saying October to December is kind of short. That's all.
You know, Bill, no matter how much the people in this room dislike me, I would think you would give this town board enough credit to say, we're not going to rush it just to pass it. We're going to follow through with the procedure, and if it's not ready to pass in December, it won't be passed.
Okay.
Very simple.
But that's-
Give us a little bit of credit, will you?
I do, and
You don't, obviously you don't.
Jerry, I like you.
Can I say something? First of all, your comments.
I try to do consensus,
Bill,
that's
Bill,
one of my things.
Bill, your comments have been very good and very much appreciated by me. And I think of all of us here. I get it, and I get your sentiment. Ma'am, lady in the white right here in the first row, can I have your attention?
Yes.
Please, don't ever refer to me or any of these 5 people up here as lame ducks. I will tell you, we come to work each and every day. I've been on this board 8 years. I've never met 5 people that has committed.
I'm not saying
as
that
much-
you haven't.
Well, it's just a little objectionable.
Spoken to me, so I have the right to just
Sure,
back.
sure.
I didn't say you didn't do your work. I said that the candidates, there was a different set of candidates that overwhelmingly won your places. That's a very different argument.
All right, so I'm going to just respond to Bill's comment about a timeline. So-
Could you, the secret, if you could, someone ask
Yeah,
that, I'm
so-
gonna sit down, but please be more.
So people keep asking, what's the timeline? What's the timeline? So what we did was we created a timeline that puts all the benchmarks out so people can see what they are. And then as we approach those benchmarks, if it's appropriate to act on them at that point, we will. If it's not appropriate, then we'll push the timeline back. But people keep asking, what's the timeline? What's the process? And so that's what we're trying to provide you, is a timeline with the process. And so it will adjust as necessary depending on where we are in the process. But that's just so you have a guidance document.
Julia Brennan from the Shelter Island Gazette. I have a question about the CEQA process. That is, a comprehensive plan is considered a type 1 action under CEQA. And typically, what's done in these instances is you create a generic environmental impact statement. No?
No,
You make a negative declaration.
Based on the long EAF.
So you can do the long EAF, say it's a negative declaration, and you're done.
that's correct.
Okay, at that point, there's no need for a public hearing regarding secret. If it's a negative declaration, or is there?
Yeah, once there's a negative declaration, the seeker process
Ends.
is complete.
It's done.
Yes.
There's still the adoption of the plan. That's kind of a separate kind of a thing, but yes.
Are there any things that you contemplate in this particular comprehensive plan that could trigger the need for a generic environmental impact statement?
Just looking at it preliminarily, we haven't done the EAF yet, but I don't think we're looking at anything that's going to result in a significant impact. We'll have to kind of take a fine, to look at things closely, but most of what we're looking at is really more preserving areas and really safeguarding water quality, making sure to kind of have targeted impacts. But again, I think we'll have to identify what those impacts are and present it to the town board. It's not my decision. It's the lead agency's decision, and we'll have to kind of present that.
What I would recommend is that the town board consider hiring PW Grosser to be an independent secret reviewer and the entity that already, created the plan. You don't want the same entity that created the plan doing the secret review. So you may want to have PW Grosser make the determination, because the town board needs to rely on that expertise.
Susan, do you have any?
Yeah, I was going to just jump in. I mean, I think ultimately it's the town board's decision on hiring any additional or outside consultant. I will say that it's very typical in our experience that a firm does both the plan and the seeker. And the only other thing that I wanted to add is that GEIS is only required when there is identification of significant adverse environmental impacts. So the long form EAF will be done, and that will identify all the range of impacts. Only if you've identified a significant adverse impact is there the need to do a GIS. A significant beneficial impact would not require a GIS. And we do think that many of the recommendations here would result in beneficial impacts to the environment.
And some of the items might require subsequent seeker review.
Site specific.
site-specific review
Right, particularly in the implementation.
and implementation, yeah.
Can I just make a comment? People are saying, what's the rush, what's the rush? But at the same time, certain people are saying we need to adopt some codes to address some issues urgently. However, the zoning code has to be adopted in conformity with a comprehensive plan. And since we're updating the comprehensive plan, we really shouldn't be changing our zoning code until it's finally updated and adopted. So you got to take that into account.
Is that mandatory?
You're changing. Yes.
You have to come
Yes.
to the podium, please.
How can that be?
Whoever wants to speak has to come up to the.
We do have a comprehensive.
I know, but you didn't have one before.
Please,
so-
Mr.
If you want, all right, we're not gonna go back and
Yeah,
forth.
we have to-
Anybody else want to speak, come up to the podium.
Change codes before you had a plan.
Come up.
I can talk to you outside if you like.
Well, it's just common sense.
No, it's not, but I'll take, yeah.
No back and forth.
Jans Verdal. So my question is, you're gonna have the first public workshop where you're gonna present the summary of your recommendations, just like you did to town board on August 24th, right? I reviewed this presentation here, and what's missing here is what everybody is waiting for, which is what changes to the zoning will be done, okay? And we know they will be done, because without changing zoning, I don't think you can implement community housing, because that's a higher density than 1 acre, which is currently allowed. Please don't interrupt me.
Did I say anything, Jan?
How are you looking at?
I'm engrossed in what you're saying.
I'm sorry?
Mike, enough.
Just chill, okay? Then the mentioning was done about subdivisions. We would like to know what those subdivisions are, okay? A pretty good idea, but we would like to hear it from this town board and from you. What zoning changes are you gonna propose, okay? That's what's missing, and I would really ask you that you present this on the 24th. Otherwise, there's really not that much talk about it. I mean, we can talk about various general statements, platitudes, and so forth. There are some specific items in there. A lot of it is pretty generic. We wanted to know what zoning changes are you gonna propose. Second thing, SECRA, so you haven't done zoning changes or other specific things, so you don't know if there's gonna be negative impact on the environment or not. And therefore, you're assuming that there's gonna be SECRA type 2, no environmental impact and so forth. You don't know that because, for example, zoning changes, depending on density, which you're gonna propose, there may be a negative environmental impact. Or the idea such as creating public water system in Ireland, moving water from one area to another. Where is this water is gonna come from? What environmental impacts is gonna cause in the areas where the water is extracted from? And so forth, okay? So all those things, those are serious issues that need to be studied, okay? But I hear from you that it's gonna be back to action, no neck deck, and nothing to see there environmental-wise. So do you have?
No, I would just say that some of the things that you're talking about would require seeker review for any subsequent action. We would be reviewing the comprehensive plan, which would be kind of more on policies and recommendations, a general kind of policy for townwide activities such as addressing you mentioned water quality. If you were going to do any kind of major infrastructure improvements, sell town-owned land, that would require environmental review.
They are proposed here, or at least public water was.
So what Noah is saying is that they might be recommendations, but then it's up to the board and the community to start implementing them. And at the time of implementation, when you look into doing something, that's when you would do a seeker on it. So for example, the wastewater treatment plant, when we looked into that, then that required its own independent seeker review. You can't really do an independent seeker review on each one of these recommendations because you don't have all the parameters. So you're looking at it as an overall picture of the future, not necessarily on a project by project basis, because you don't have the full context for every project. That has to be done independently. That secret has to be done
So
per
I
project.
just disagree with this because it says here, create a phase master plan for public water utility service, okay?
Right.
So this is a mandate to create something, okay? You cannot make, it's a different thing when you say consider, a different thing when you say create, okay? If it's a mandate, the environmental impact of this review.
I think
I'm not creating a
there's,
project, I'm creating a plan.
there's just,
a concept.
I also want to, I think it's important to kind of like address one misconception about a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is most important for zoning decisions. So zoning should or needs to be based on a well-reasoned plan. The other policies should be based on a comprehensive plan, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't have the same kind of mandate as zoning. So a phase master plan, that's a recommendation that we came up with based on our understanding of the issues, best practices, what the town needs. The town would still need to do that, but it's not like, it's not a mandate in that, all these actions require further actions by the town board, by other agencies, regional agencies, their recommendations.
Okay, so then let's stick to zoning, and then could you promise us that on 24th, you're gonna say what the outline of the zoning changes will be?
We can go into more detail into the zoning.
Yeah, like basic recommendations and discuss whether this will require an environmental review or not.
Well, that is not.
If I could jump
that's
in,
not-
it does require environmental review. It's not
Yeah.
a type 2 action. A comprehensive plan is a type 1 action, which means
Yeah.
the environmental review will be done. It's just a question of what that determination is. We don't know it yet because the environmental review hasn't been done, but we anticipate that it's likely that there will not be significant adverse environmental impacts. Therefore, GIS wouldn't be required. If there were the case that there were significant adverse environmental impacts identified, a GIS would need to be done.
Okay,
We're not
well,
quite there yet.
Since we don't know what the zoning changes will be, we don't know whether this is gonna be type 1.
Oh, correct me if I'm wrong. There'll be no zoning changes in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
There'll be recommendations, and if and when the comprehensive plan is adopted, the town board will make zoning changes.
Yeah, and you can, that's correct. And if you can, basically, you'll do a secret again when you do any zoning changes. If we knew of the changes, the specific changes that you wanted to do and you wanted to kind of adopt the zoning with the comprehensive plan, then it would probably be a good idea to review all of those zoning changes at the same time.
In other words, 25 years ago, when we adopted the original comprehensive plan, I sat on the town board that changed the zoning code based on the comprehensive plan.
Right.
Spent 2 years doing that.
Right.
Wasn't that we adopted the comprehensive plan and zoning change,
Right.
one then the next.
Right.
But
Still
if
have
you
to go through
recommend,
that process.
but if you recommend zoning changes, for example, increased density from 1 acre to half acre, island-wide or in certain areas or whatever.
We're not making that recommendation. That's
You're
not, no.
So what recommendations will you be making?
I can tell you, we're not recommending.
But even if you were, all of this is a recommendation, and the town board has to decide what they're doing. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Well, all I'm saying is, please present the basic outline of the zoning, chapter 3,
We would do
chapter
that.
11, on the 24th. So there's something to talk about for the public.
Stella? Stella, I recognize Stella next.
I'm Stella Budis, the Shelter Island Heights Properties Owners Corp. And I know you guys have all put in a lot of time. I'm going to ask for a little bit more time for slightly different reason. And that has to do with, there are several references in the plan, the draft that we just saw that touches the heights. There's mention of Bridge Street, which, Jim and I have spoken about. There's reference to perhaps complete streets where there might be streets that are owned by the Heights that might add the complication, Noah, that you referenced. There's the thought about maybe a special change with zoning in the business zone in the Heights. So Meg, you said you have a handful of homeowners associations that you and BJ are going to meet with, and we're one of them. And we're pretty big. I mean, we've got over, 200 property owners, and we're working very hard to get folks within the Heights to learn more about the plan, give us feedback. We're going to be meeting with them before we meet with you, so we can collect as much info as possible. We're not meeting with BJ and Meg until the 28th, and that's after the 24th. So I just feel that before any planning that pertains to the Heights gets put into this particular comprehensive plan, perhaps we just need to scratch a little bit deeper to see if it's something that we also think is reasonable, and we think the Heights thinks that we could work together toward that end. Not too different from, concepts that we've talked about vis-a-vis Bridge Street. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kim Nolan. I hate to say this, but it's absolutely disingenuous, and I'm looking at the planners and the lawyers in this room, to say that zoning doesn't really happen in a comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan goes hand in hand with zoning, and it's set forth in state law. And it's a blueprint for zoning changes that are to occur later. So I think the sooner that you can get out the exact language on zoning, the better off we're all going to be, because it's going to take some of the legal issues out of the plan, including the legal issue about SECRA. Earlier, you said a concept that, and I've listened to all the meetings, the CPAC meetings, that is, and I've tried to read every page of the writings that have been presented so far, but you've made some statements that haven't really been very, very much discussed in all this lengthy planning. And that is that the land use patterns on the island don't match its zoning. Now, to me, that says, and we're going to change that, or at least we're going to look at it and maybe try. And that's why you get the concept that the comprehensive plan is a blueprint for zoning changes to come in the town or municipality. And again, I think it's really disingenuous to keep pushing pieces of paper, PowerPoints, cartoons, etc., against an intelligent populace who can read documents and understand what you have in mind for the changes on this island. Another thing that came up today, and then I'm going to quit, is the waterways discussion. It's something I've been asking for months. This is an island with 45 miles of shorelines. As president of the SIA, I represent neighborhoods who most of their land mass is part of these shorelines. And yet we have only seen today a few recommendations about what's going to happen there. Some things that I heard were access to boats is limited. Let's review dredging plans. These are concepts that are critically important on this island, and there has been no discussion. I'm sorry, Meg, you guys have done a great job, but I've been asking for a plan on the shorelines from the very beginning. In the meantime, we've had serious legislation passed here against community opinion and in the face of great community opposition about our wetlands. So I really think it's time to flesh out that aspect of this plan. And I think it's going to take more than a month or two. If you're good on the zoning, you will get us something very complete by October. And if you think that you can pass that with any professional or legal legitimacy by December, I challenge you.
Could you, before you leave, can I ask you a question? Kip, can I ask you a question? What exactly land use patterns don't match zoning?
That's what Noah Levine said 15 minutes ago.
I can explain it. I don't. I mean, first of all, I just want to say it's very difficult to go through all of the recommendations in an hour long. We wanted to kind of keep you abreast. We do have, put more thought into it. If it, just reads as one line, it doesn't mean that it's just kind of a passing idea. It's just that we have a lot to get through. So I just want to be clear about that.
No, can I just?
Let me just finish. There are, looking at the zoning from a outside perspective, you see commercial areas that are zoned residential. You have commercial areas in the Heights that are zoned single-family residential.
You mean residential areas where there's commercial activity, not commercial areas where.
Right.
No, I think.
Right.
No, I mean,
No, you have it right.
but no. Commercial areas that are zoned residential.
In residential areas where there's commercial activity.
Anybody that's speaking in the audience.
Talking about
We're not gonna go back and forth here.
And so when you look at that from a land use perspective, you kind of look at the mismatch. You see, okay, these are commercial areas that are acting as commercial districts, but are zoned residential. We're not anticipating any major changes, but if those property owners ever wanted to make a change, they're in a residential district. Those areas couldn't continue to persist as they operate now. From a planner's perspective, that is not desirable. You want to, support those uses that are there. You have a number of non-conforming issues in established commercial areas.
Okay. If somebody's gonna speak, you gotta come to the podium. He's got the floor right now.
I'm just going to remind people to come to the podium because we've got 11 people on Zoom, and then we also have this film live streaming on YouTube. So if you want to be heard by everyone, you do need to come forward, please.
I'd like to just address Kim's point. So I've always said, and I'm on record, Jerry repeated it, he has said it, a condition precedent to updating zoning is the comprehensive plan. You cannot enact zoning if you have a comprehensive plan and the zoning not be in accordance with it. So I don't know why you're upset about that point. We're in agreement. And that's why I said to this woman that. Patricia, sorry, I forgot your name. Patricia. That's why I said to Patricia, she is very adamant that there be a zoning change to protect trees. And I'm saying that the comprehensive plan needs to be updated so we can adopt such a regulation.
That's what you have time to do that.
All right.
Then put a
Any other-
moratorium on taking trees down.
Do I get another 3 minutes?
Did anybody else want to speak? We have to go around the table. No, it's 4:30.
First speakers first. If the people haven't spoken.
Stephen Jacobs, two preliminary comments. First, I think there's a crying need for a new comprehensive plan 30 years after the other one. For the sake of the island, it would obviously be good if it were a plan that could get broad, not universal support. Secondly, I do recognize and compliment the hard work that Meg and BJ have put into this. Also, Lily, Ben, and the volunteer members of CPAC. I know it's been a lot of work. I just briefly want to address the environmental issues. First, the notion of completing the SECRA process here is basically a euphemism for not doing, as Julia alluded to, an environmental impact statement. The contract for the consultants assumes there will be a negative declaration that will avoid having to do that type of full-blown environmental review. I'm not an environmental lawyer. The environmental lawyers can duke it out, hopefully without going to court. But I just want to make a very basic point again, a point that Pat Clifford and I have been making since, I think it was February of last year, in letters to the task force, to CPAC, to the reporter, posted, at least in my case, in comments, and that is, what sense does it make to be planning for the future of the island without the planning process being informed by a meaningful study of particularly the aquifer, including and particularly how much development will the aquifer support? I don't know the answer to that question. So I don't know how anybody can meaningfully talk about development without considering it. And I guess I would just like to end with a question, and that is, as I mentioned, the consultant's contract assumes, that's the word in the contract, that there will be a negative declaration that will avoid a generic environmental impact statement. So my question, it's really a question for the town board, is why is the town board trying to avoid this, particularly when in 1994, the town board at that time did a generic environmental impact statement. And in 1994, as I think we can all agree, maybe there's nothing else we can all agree on, but in 1994, there was vastly less development. There were no concerns about drinking water or wastewater. Maybe there should have been, but there really wasn't. So my question is, if it was appropriate then, why isn't it even more appropriate now? Thank you.
Right.
I just want to clarify one thing. Our contract doesn't assume a negative declaration. We just can't we have to establish a scope, and so we can fulfill a scope, and it's very difficult for us to bid a scope that includes an EIS. So that's kind of like, if the town should decide to do that, that would have to be an extension on what we agreed to do. It's just very hard for us to understand what that work would be when you start a project.
It would be an amended contract at that point,
Right.
if you need to do a full EIS. So when you do the contract and you're bidding the contract, you're saying, this contract is just assuming that this is if it's not a neg, then you'd have to go amend the contract and we'd have to expand it.
But that obviously, given the contract, which I have here, is what is contemplated and the hoped for result.
Could you just read that again, Steve?
Well,
No, we don't need to read that again. No, we don't need to read.
Request.
No, so part of it is you do want to create a comprehensive plan that has a negative declaration. Because you don't want to create a plan that's going to create a significant adverse impact to your community. So, for the purpose of the contract and having to bid out a contract, you're going to write that you're assuming a neg dec. However, when you actually create a plan, you don't want to have a plan that creates a negative impact on the environment and your community. So hopefully the plan we develop is worthy of a negative declaration.
But why is it, I would like to ask, that the New York Division of Local Government Services says, this is their FAQs for local officials, while it is possible to issue a negative declaration in connection with the adoption of a comprehensive plan, the generic EIS is the most appropriate way to analyze the environmental impacts of a comprehensive plan.
And we may need one we don't know yet. We haven't finished the scope.
And you can hear it in the
Earlier, Kim Baumstrom had his.
Yeah, he's all right, once more, real quick, John. Something new.
Yes, I have a question for Noah. You made a statement, something about business operating in residential zone. It should be a business zone. Could you repeat what you just said?
Sure. So in certain areas of the Heights, areas along Bridge Street, those areas are not zoned for business uses. They're zoned residential uses. And so that's something that you would want to look at to make sure that those businesses could continue so that they weren't, to make them conforming uses, basically.
Okay, so we have a different perspective on it, okay? Because we have businesses which are pre-existing, non-conforming, operating in residential zones, okay? And that's what keep the neighbors safe from from expansion of those businesses and ruining those residential areas, okay? So what you said sounds like you would like to create a spot business zoning in the middle of residential neighborhoods, okay?
No.
But you should take into the consideration the impact of allowing rezoning a spot into a business use so they can expand and grow, which I think was your objective as an urban planner. Well, this is not an objective for us who live here.
I think
Okay,
you're
because the fact that those businesses operating as pre-existing non-conforming business in residential zone provides some measure of protection for the residents that surround these areas.
Okay.
That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Jan. We'll
Okay,
take that
thank
into
you.
consideration.
Bella?
Stella Buddhist again. So that's exactly what I was up here talking about before. You mentioned the Heights. I'm sure you're clear that Bridge Street is not part of the Heights, correct?
Bridge Street and the Heights, that I understand that.
Okay,
yes.
totally
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
But there are commercial entities in residential neighborhoods. We are very concerned about spot zoning and giving those businesses expansion. So again, a reason to really come talk to us and have this back and forth in more detail, which may kind of slow down the process, but it's better that we get it out now and talk about it and even determine if it still needs to be in there. Because it might be fine for you as an urban developer to say like, this is best practice, but these residents live there and we need to be protective of the residents.
Gordon?
I'm not here, I'm not looking for a debate, I'm not looking for back and forth conversation. I'd like to just be respected for what I'm gonna say. And we've been, this town board has been, I got 3 minutes, so let me make it short. We've been down this road so many times before, where people of the public come here to talk, okay? And quite honestly, I think what we should be doing, okay, just listening and being, both sides being respectful to each other. But what's really so obvious, okay, is that over this comprehensive plan, there's a lot of work still to be done, okay? And I think that the question came up about what's the rush. I think a big majority of the community feels exactly that way. If you spend 3 years, we really don't want to discuss what happened to all that time, because that's another whole story, okay? But the point being, okay, I think we could just slow this thing, not slow it down, that's probably a poor expression. Maybe explore other avenues and get to all the solutions that are necessary. I think we are in a political year. We will have a new supervisor this year in November. There'll be 2 other new board members on here. And I'm just saying to you, I think what you're hearing from most folks is saying, hey, thank you very much. You've done a great job putting this together, at least addressing an issue, the comprehensive plan. But we want to really explore everything. And quite honestly, that's how I feel. I think there's a lot more work, and there should be no reason to really have a date of December 15th or whatever. We don't even have a draft, so even when we do a virtual meeting, which I'm really not in favor of, okay, but we don't even have anything to look at. We didn't even have this plan until yesterday. So, now everybody had to take a look at it. But when we say, what's the rush? There is no rush. Well, there is a rush, okay, because the documents come out late. I mean, if we really want to be serious about it, we have to just be a little bit more respectful when people come to the podium and they want to talk. We should listen to them, not get into this debate. And everyone is guilty in that. But I'm just saying that I think that we really need to explore everything. There have been some good ideas here. I don't think they can be resolved, okay, in that timeline. And besides, if it's not done at that particular time, there should be no rush, okay, and it'll get done, okay. But the board is to be thanked. Okay, you're going to hear it from me. You are to be thanked for some of the issues that you have been addressing, okay?
And I think your early work, okay, will get accomplished. It may not be by this existing board, but it'll be taken over the goal line in the future in the near future. But I think the rushing, I don't think there's a need for it unless someone can tell me why it has to be done in such a short space of time now. Thank you.
It seems, it seems the people here, the majority of the people here feel that we're rushing the process and that we should wait for the new town board to take over. This town board was elected and we're here through December 31st. We're going to continue the process that we started. There's no reason not to continue the process. We're not rushing anything. We're going to, if we come December and we don't reach a conclusion, there's nothing wrong with that. Then the next town board takes it over from there. But we're not going to stop the process now just because people don't like the way it's going. We're going to continue. We're going to continue to listen to the public, and that's where we're going to go with it. Pat?
I think one of the concerns might be people reading the newspaper, those who are not completely up to speed, might be seeing the various projects that appear to be in the works, whether it's the Menantic project that was in this week, whether it's Gardner's Bay asking for 6 million gallons more of water, which is already the biggest user of water on the island. A number of projects that we're all well aware of that are in the works. And I think the fear might be that these projects somehow or another would get approved. You'd have acreage going from 1 acre, I know they asked for a 1/4 acre, then we said maybe we'll split the difference to 1/2 an acre. You know, maybe 6 million gallons isn't so much because we got some statistics that say there's an unknown amount of water underneath. That fear is real. People ask me on a regular basis about the projects they see in the paper. And they see it in the paper, and they also see it online, to be honest. And I think if those projects are not gonna happen, I don't mean that they're turned down or anything, if they're not gonna happen in this period between now and December, I think whether it's a moratorium or whether it's just naturally gonna take that long, that would help people to calm down and say, okay, let's get the plan done first. And the last one connected to it is the environment. You can't say that you have a minimum required to look at the environment. You have the #1 user of water on the island, asking to double. That alone would be more water being used than all the other projects that are being asked. And to do that without an environmental study, you'll do that with me in court before you get your way on doing it.
The golf course isn't addressed in the comprehensive plan, but restrictions on irrigation is addressed in the
I
comprehensive
saw
plan.
that there, and I was looking for something that would mention, but it wasn't in there. People are aware of it now, it's in the paper.
Well,
They're
the
looking
plan-
at it and they're asking
The
questions.
plan doesn't call out specific industry or specific businesses. It doesn't function that way.
No, I know it
It's-
doesn't that way, but I'm telling you, it's in the papers, people are asking.
Patrick, the only thing I could say on Gardner's Bay Country Club is this town board, we've spent zero amount of time discussing that. We're not in favor of it. Generally speaking, I don't know if I'm speaking for all 5 of us, but we have never, ever seriously entertained that. When that information came up, we were in the middle of a drought. Yeah, we've gotten 2 or 3 good rains in the last week, but I worked there for 8 years. The thing that bothers me most about that request too is that the shifting of the people from the golf course is more South Fork people now, who could care less. So in the old days, when 80-90% of the people of Gardner's Bay were residents of Shelter Island, that was good enough. Now that we're taking 45%, almost 50% of the people off island, as you know, to Gardner's Bay, to green up fairways, you know, that's the least of our concerns. We're talking, everything we've been talking about in the last 2 months is about water conservation, not giving them 6 more million gallons of water to get the greens fairways.
Ben?
I'm good. Pat said it well.
One last small comment, playing off of what I had said before. One thing I think that we kind of got today is I wish it was in a lot less adversarial kind of manner, is that there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of information. There's a lot more dialogue that needs to occur back and forth. And I think that overall, most people have, I hope they have an appreciation for the amount of work that you've done. I know how much Meg has done, and I'm totally appreciative of that. It's going back to what you had said before, Jerry. I don't think it's that people are just saying stop. I don't think anyone wants it to be stopped. I think people want the process to continue, but to continue that there isn't an artificial date. You've kind of backed away a little from that today, but that there isn't an artificial date that it has to be finished by, because there's going to still be questions, there's still going to be dialogue. Steve raised an amazingly good point today that I didn't know anything about, still don't understand completely, but I think we still need that information and that dialogue, hopefully respectfully, hopefully in good faith, back and forth. We don't all have to agree on everything, but I think that having that work is important, and not having an artificial deadline would make things feel a little bit better optically. That's all.
Okay. No more comments. We're gonna Zoom audience. Anybody?
I have one final question, please. When are we gonna?
You have to come to the audience.
Peter Grant has his hand up. Who is Peter Grant has his hand up?
Before you start, I'm sorry.
Sure.
When do you expect to deliver the actual zoning chapter?
I can't answer that right now. We'll talk about it with Megan. We'll think about it, but I can't give you an answer without talking with the task force and.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, we just need some time. Yep.
Anybody else?
Okay.
That was a nice summation, by the way. Applaud you, Peter's summation. It was well taken. Thank you.
Anybody on Zoom?
There might be people on Zoom.
Yeah, nobody has their hand up.
Oh, wait, does Peter?
Peter Grant,
did
you have your
raise his
hand up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to comment at length. I just want to say, first of all, I want to congratulate everybody. This was a good discussion, not a bad discussion. And I learned a lot. And I just want to say that the plan is important. And however it works out, on whatever timeline it works out, we actually do need to be taking action. And if the plan needs to be either vague enough to accommodate different interpretations, or needs to take longer so that everybody can come on board one way or another, we need it. We need this to happen. And we need to then proceed onward with all these tasks, like keeping a tree canopy and protecting the estuaries and, protecting people's health and drinking water. So, just keep on and keep going. And, congratulations to everybody for a good discussion.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, if there's no more comments on this, I'm going to make a motion. We adjourn the work session to go into a special meeting to continue the public hearing on the moratorium exception for the One Pandian project. A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. We can give it a pause if anybody wants to leave here just for a second. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Stephen, you have the sheet?
This is the energy in the room when I have back. You're handling something.
Today was
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Noah. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
No,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you Friday.
Thank you. Used to that. That's every meeting I have with them.
Better you than me. Okay, we're ready to reconvene. This is the continuation. We started the public hearing for the exemption, the moratorium. This is One Pandion, the project that was started. It went from being under 5,999 square feet. And when they broke ground for the foundation, they hit water and they realized they couldn't put a full basement in. So they changed the plans. They built a barn and they'd like to finish the barn. That brings them over the limit, so they have to apply for a special permit.
Actually, Linda, we asked her about correspondence.
Oh, okay. Linda, yeah, we have new correspondence since the hearing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. We received a letter from Lori Beard Raymond regarding One Pandion. And if anyone wants to look at it, they can see it in the town clerk's office.
So I didn't want to let them start.
So
I'll address some of the questions
Yeah.
from the letter. There was some of the questions some of us had also. The ask is to finish 2,200 square feet in the barn, but you only lost 700 square feet due to the basement. Project is 5,298 square feet, and now requesting.
Here, I'm sorry, can we have him come up to the podium and maybe you ask the questions to him in real time, like?
It's a little bit too late. We're gonna do it in person.
Quite the show, yeah. So basically, she's saying, it's now over 3 times larger than the 700 square foot basement space. I'll give you all the questions, so then we can go. Why didn't the architect or engineer know that they could not build a basement on this site in the first place?
Ask the people if they would take their conversation outside, please.
Was a soil boring done? Was a test hole or water table done? All the requirements for a building permit in sensitive shoreline areas. Then the last question is, how is this a hardship to increase square footage? The barn could be built and left unfinished as originally intended. Lori Beard Raymond.
Well,
Okay, so Josh Greenwald, One Pandion. So the first question regarding the square footage. So original approval was for just under 6,000 square foot main house, and the barn is 2,200 square foot. I believe it's 1,100 square foot is unfinished basement. When we discovered the high water table, 700 square foot of the main house. Sort of square footage, and what we're trying to do is just insulate, heat and cool the approved and constructed barn of what I believe is 1,200 square feet of that 2,200 square feet. So that's the explanation of the adjusted numbers. And with regards to the water table, we did do water tests. The architect and engineering firm was engaged, and they advised that we had enough room between the water table to do a 9-foot ceiling in the basement. And then when we did the excavation, actually the excavation results were consistent with the water, were in water reports. But the recommendation was that you should have a larger buffer between the top of the water table and the bottom foundation. And so that's when we made the decision to, instead, so that there's like, you can do a reinforced basement. And we made the decision to just go with a utility basement. And the main issue is that I listened to the hearing on comprehensive plan, and I think it's a really important and great idea and necessary for the community. And a lot of people talking about timing, and I think the process has been going on for a while, and it appears that it's going to take quite a bit of time more. And I bought this land, One Pandion, late 2021, broke ground in April 2022. The end of last year, I believe this board approved my immediate neighbor, Lot 3, for over 10,000 square feet. And it's one thing, and it's one thing that I understand that the community goals are shifting and changing, and I understand that. But this is an immediate neighbor within a 5-lot subdivision, and these are all oversized lots. These are 3.5 acre lots, and this is just I'm just going to read one sort of excerpt from a planning approval, and it goes basically. This is for the Lot 3 approval. We know Shelter Island has a long history of frowning on very large houses and favoring smaller cottages, but we also realize that we have a recent history with several precedents of allowing large house when the lot is large. And that's sort of the key distinction with this subdivision, with this particular property. And that's why I'm appealing for the exception to the moratorium, because I think this moratorium could go on for an undetermined amount of time. The hardship, I'm just finishing up the main house, and we've got all kinds of tradespeople all over the site. Will be done, in the next couple of months, and to remobilize every one of those trades, installation, drywall, finishes, it'd be a significant cost and hardship. And that's what the appeal is.
Question? I think the real key here is that, we have other applications before us that are questioning it also, but yours is, already, it's more than started. It's almost done, as opposed to the other ones that are applying for, permits. That carries a lot of weight. The fact that we approved the one next to you fairly recently, then you came in, into the moratorium, carries some weight too. So I think I changed my vote.
No, let's not talk about that. But I just wanted the board to remember procedurally.
Yes.
If you vote in favor of his application for a hardship exemption, he still has to make a presentation back in front of the board for that special permit. This just allows him to make that pitch to the board. Okay? But I think the board should talk about it in a work session.
Okay. Anybody else? This is a public hearing. Anybody want?
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Bill?
I have comments.
Yeah, come up.
Gotta come up.
So Stella Lagudas, Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corp. That didn't sound like a hardship to me. Anyone can say the materials are going to go up, it's going to cost me more money. I just think it's opening up potentially to say yes, a Pandora's box. We're already, 2 months into a 6-month moratorium. There are others that are out there who've spent a lot of money on all kinds of plans. So I just hope that if this board agrees to allow it, that it doesn't open us up to any other kind of litigation from someone else saying, you didn't let me do it. So, thank you.
I agree, and that was my biggest concern still, but this is the only project before us that's actually started. and close to, more than started, close to completion.
But is it for what the original application was for? You know, that's not clear to me, that what's before us now was the original application. It had to change, that I get. So, again, obviously this is your bailiwick. I just wanted to throw that out. And the other thing is, I don't think we have any precedent with respect to like how do you handle a moratorium. But if someone's going to make a plea for a moratorium exemption, should there be a more formal process? Because I know I actually tried to foil or call and say, where's the application? Where's all the information? And there really wasn't any. So if this happens again, I don't know if we want to think about making the process a little bit more formal with some kind of an application that outlines some of the questions that, you guys posed. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just to respond quickly, just that the plan did change from original, and the special permit application was submitted before the moratorium was enacted. And then also just the approval, there is no impact to water. There is no impact to additional development in the sense that the barn structure is built.
Okay, any more comments? That's chance. All right, then we're gonna close this hearing, okay?
And then we'll put it on for
And
next week.
we'll put it on for the work session for next week to discuss. Okay, so we're gonna close this hearing. We are gonna, is there anything else?
Make a motion.
For what?
Oh, no, you gotta make a motion to close this
You
hearing.
just did.
No, you didn't.
Made a motion, let's make a motion, we
second.
close. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. What do you want me to do?
We just set the public hearing for shelter and fire, just for departments to.
Oh, do we have
but,
something to read?
I'm going to recuse myself, even though I am the treasurer for the fire district, not the department. I'm just going to recuse myself anyways.
Okay.
So I'm taking my phone, you can text me.
Resolution to schedule a public hearing before the town board of the town of Shelter Island with respect to the request of the Shelter Island Fire Department for the approval of the town board of the plan of the Shelter Island Fire Department to incorporate as the Shelter Island Fire Department, Inc., a not-for-profit corporation pursuant to Section 404 of the State of New York Not-for-Profit Corporation. Please take note that the town board of the town of Shelter Island hereby directs that a public hearing shall be held on Tuesday, September 19th, 2023 at 6 p.m. prevailing time at the town hall located at 38 North Ferry Road, Shelter Island, New York, to hear any and all persons either for or against the granting of the approval by resolution of the town board of the plan of the Shelter Island Fire Department to incorporate as a not-for-profit corporation pursuant to Section 404F of the New York State Not-for-Profit Corporation Law. Said approval and resolution to accompany and support the filing of the Shelter Island Fire Department Certificate of Incorporation to be presented for filing with the New York State Department of State. Said certificate to be executed by Warren Baker, David Austin, Walter J. Cogan, and such other persons appointed by the department by order of the town board of the town of Shelter Island, New York. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we got three. Okay, now I can close the special meeting. Get Amber back. Shut the back door. Which text her?
Which door did she go out?
Is Amber out there?
You got it.
She's coming, I see her.
And then open it up. Around the table. Hey, Meg?
Doing a roundtable?
Yeah.
All right, so we can do this. We continued, BJ and I, our meetings with homeowners associations, and this past Saturday, we went and met with the High-Low Shores Association, and we got their input for the comp plan. They had a lot of very good questions. So it was really nice to meet with them and just kind of get an understanding of what they're looking at in their community. We had,
So you've met with a few different groups.
we've met with a whole bunch of groups, actually. I have a whole list. Let me see if I can pull it up because I'm keeping track of them. And we met with Silver Beach, Shelterlands, Hilo, Hay Beach, Menantic Peninsula, and then,
Creek.
well,
You mean
Menantic
both of them?
Creek Keepers, the fire district. And we have appointments to meet with, and Hilo, we have appointments to meet with, Fresh Pond Neighbors Association, South Ferry Hills, Tut Hill Drive Neighbors Association, and then we had a meeting scheduled with the Shelter Island Association, but they wanted to reschedule for a later date. So we're waiting for a new date to meet with them. And the Ram Island Association also wants to meet at a later date. So we're scheduling that.
So Meg, just for my own information, have you, when you met with all these different groups, are they telling you to slow down with the comprehensive?
No, I haven't heard that.
Okay, that's.
I heard that from Hay Beach. It's the same people who were here. But what I have heard is, mostly reaching out about some of the things that, we've already been discussing a little bit, concerns about a need for water, the Hay Beach adjacent to West Neck Water District. There were members there who were asking how they could hook up, or what the process is, or how does it work. And a lot of it is sharing information with them. They just don't know that, on the website, there's a West Neck Water District board and they can talk to Lisa Shaw. So a lot of it's just like opening channels of communication. So, it's been really good. I have notes from all of them that I'm going to put together in like a master page. But, we're continuing our meetings. We've reached out to the churches, to the library, to the school, to the Lions Club, to the different organizations and civic organizations, not
The
just
reason I
homeowners.
ask is, obviously, it's going to be reported that, the vast majority of the people at the meeting, want us to stop or slow down the comprehensive plan and, don't rush and wait for the new board. I just want to hear when you're meeting with the public, what they're saying.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard that from members when I'm out in the public. But what I have heard is that they're interested in participating. They're glad that we're reaching out to them with the information and letting them know how to get involved. And, now we have more people who are going to be engaged in the public meetings going forward because they know to look out for them. We've reached out to them, essentially personally. And so now that I have the contact information for all of the presidents of these associations, when we have something coming up, I send them all an email letting them know so that they can then send it out to their constituents. So it's just creating a broader network of people to get involved.
In fairness, as more information comes out about the comprehensive plan, you can rest assured there'll be more questions. So that I think today's meeting and discussion here, I think some good points were made. Some of them were, maybe not said in a very constructive manner, but most of them were. And I think you take it to heart. And we're not on a treadmill. If we can get it done, we get it done. If not, the next town board will get it done. I say it's important to continue the process. Dot the i's, cross the t's, but I'm not in position, this is no feather in my cap, your cap, or anybody else's cap. The idea is we want to get it done. We want to get it done correctly, we want it done right. But the realization is you're not going to satisfy the needs of everybody. That's just the way things are. You won't satisfy the needs of everybody. But I think some of the points that were made today were somewhat valid, and I appreciated them. And Meg's, anything else, Megan?
Nope, that's all I got for now.
Jim?
Yep. 5 things here. Number one is Valerie got back to us about the shellfish. So last week I went to the meeting, I brought your concerns there, and here's her response from the pen. Shellfish enclosures are implemented on a case-by-case basis, but areas are evaluated under the same criteria, which is based on the National Shellfish Sanitation Program Model Ordinance. The assessment of anchorage areas is based on the following: A, boat type and usage. B, density of boats. I can give you a copy of it. C, accessibility to boats which could reduce likelihood of overnight occupancy. D, occupancy rates. E, seasonal use patterns. F, an actual and assumed rate of boats which discharge untreated waste. G, documentation, verification, and enforcement of federal no discharge zones, and locally well-enforced no discharge and occupancy regulations or bylaws. Finally, H, availability and documented use of pump-out boats, which is something we've talked about for these anchorage areas with the WMAC. We've talked about it a lot, because when they do anchor and they tie up, a lot of them are there for several days before they move. The seasonal closures that went into effect on Shelter Island are a small part of a large regulatory package that is currently in effect as an emergency rule and is open to public comment. In order to remove those closures from the regulatory package, New York State DEC would need to receive public comment objecting to those closures. And they should state why, and documentation that allows them to reconsider those areas as potentially pollution sources that could negatively affect public health if shellfish are harvested and used as food. I hope this is helpful, Valerie. So basically what we're asking the public to do, and we should probably reach out if you're concerned about this, and the shell fishermen were here last week, pretty adamant about the town taking some type of lead role here, is to solicit and ask for people to come forward. I think the data that we're getting on these weekly reports of water collections in these areas would be pivotal. To me, they would be, we're having this tested every Tuesday. Why not get that data? But we need to formalize an approach.
I texted Joe, I asked him, I think he had a meeting, I asked him to come down when he's done, because he had a lot of contact with he's got some
update on
good update for us.
Okay. Okay.
At least.
All right. So, this, oh, there you don't have to get him now. New York State DEC, using natural measures to reduce the risk of flooding and erosion. This is an August 2020 document. It's 350 pages. I am slowly getting through some of it, but it's a pretty extensive document that I will share, and I will make another copy for Joe. I think Joe should have that copy. And basically what it is designed to do, it's science-based. It's talking about sea rise and the impacts on the shoreline. So I think this was prepared, by the way, by the Natural Resiliency Measures drafting team. And it's something that we talk about maintaining conservation measures, wetlands applications, of the importance of wetlands, how to use natural means to protect our wetlands as opposed to fortified structures such as bulkheading and things of that nature. So there's lots of great ideas in here. With that, I'll get to my third item. I called the Nature Conservancy this morning and spoke to Rebecca. I asked Rebecca, in Bass Creek, we've had a 17-year study of what's going on in Bass Creek. And it all is centered on the impact of rising sea levels and how Bass Creek is reacting to that increase in sea level rise. PhD Dr. Nicole Marr, who's the coastal scientist, has been on this project for 17 years. Allison Bronco is a climate adaptation specialist. They are situated in Cold Spring Harbor office. They are the Long Island experts on coastal wetlands. I would love, and I asked Rebecca if she could ask Cody to get in contact with them to maybe schedule some time this coming September, October, to bring them in. We've had a lot of discussion about the importance of wetlands. The sooner the better that we can probably get them in. But I would love to know just how Bass Creek is reacting and what has transpired there. So I think it would be a great thing for us to pursue. That's number 3. Number 4 was on the, well, I already covered that, part of that. No, number 5 was on the CAC meeting last night. We had 2 applications. One was the Dawson Demian from 57 South Ferry Road that was voted approval 4-1. One member of the CAC was against the approval because it did not 100% agree with the getting everything out of the 100-foot. But the people that own the property were present, along with Matt Sherman. They agreed to change the stairs on the shed that were coming into the wetlands. They will also develop a vegetation plan. Joe, could you cool it, please? Thank you. Vegetative plan that is necessary and limit the ground disturbance for the new addition of what they're putting on the side of the house is a 15 by 15 foot addition to the house. So if those 3 things are done and satisfied, then they voted 4-1 to approve it. There is, that one stipulation of the addition, I think it was 97 feet, out from the wetlands, but not 100 feet. It was 97 point something.
So now they presented to the planning board, the results?
Yes. On the other application, on the 169 Ram Island Road, they voted 5-0 against the application because they again, Matt Sherman was present. The homeowner was present via Zoom. There were 6 recommendations that they had, even though they voted against it, they did come up with 6 recommendations that they shared with Matt. I won't go through them because there's no need to go through those things. They have them. Hopefully they will adhere to them. They'll resubmit the application back to the CAC, hopefully by next month with those changes made. And one of the problems in the application too was that the print was so small, it was hard to decipher what was going on in that application as well. So one went through, one went down. And the last one, which I meant to say, is I wrote all of you over the weekend, and Joe, I wrote you as well. We have, out of the 12 original protecting our water resources that we talked about at last Tuesday, we've adopted 3. One of them was adopted prior to this on drought monitoring. The other one that Karen said was already part of the building code was the WaterSense certified appliance and fixtures. And last week we covered the pool cover. So 3 of the 12 have been addressed. 2 of them are put to the back burner for a later date. There are 7 other remaining ones: the use of Energy Star appliances, installation of flow logic, requiring landscape plan to support native plants and grasses, well pumped recommendation, use of water storage tanks, installation of cisterns, and requiring groundwater monitoring prior to the building of a new home and the size of the home that you could build on it based on that groundwater study. Those 7 still need to be tackled. So I consider those on the front burner, Joe. So the WAC, you, and I would love to have Karen participate in a mini group, maybe a subcommittee of the WAC to look at these 7. Are there any of these 7 that you would bring back to the town board saying, we could support these 3, these 4 would need to be put on the back burner? So I don't want to kill the momentum of what we're doing, because I think what we're doing is we are protecting our water resources. And since these other ones were all voted on and agreed upon by the 5 of us as something that needed further study, let's do the further study and let's have a recommendation back from you, Reed, and the WAC on how to proceed with these other 7. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Joe, before you came in, Jim gave a response from the PEP about the closures with the claim.
I'll give you the copy.
You want to give us your update with your correspondence with the DEC?
Yeah, I don't have an update from the PEP.
I haven't.
No, he did. I said you had spoken with the DEC.
Oh, yes, Stephen also, Stephen and Bo and I. And so the update effectively is that the closure they issued on the emergency basis expires in October. It would ultimately kick in every year from May through October. And so we are nearing that October expiration anyhow. So those shellfishing grounds will be open for commercial shellfishing anyway, beginning the end of October and all winter. We met with the state and have a plan put in place such that next spring, this closure won't happen again. But it's unclear when this emergency closure will be lifted. Perhaps the deadline in October that would come up anyway will precede the removal of this. So we're working to try and get this expedited, but
Worst case scenario.
Worst case, this is open at the end of October. We're trying to make it earlier than that. And they have indicated that this will be no longer a problem come next spring.
I'll give you a copy of what the PEP, it doesn't disagree with anything you've said, but it also gives you some recommendations on what to do.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, there's also, I'm sorry, a legislative mechanism for us to make comments regarding this particular emergency closure.
Yes, we have.
And we're gonna present our plan. So we're pursuing that, so we can do everything in our power to make sure that come next season, it'll be wide open for shellfishing.
I think that's what they're looking for. I need 30 seconds, Mario. I'll just show you, here's a couple of facts on the Newsday article. About 70% of the 70 billion gallons of drinking water pumped by Suffolk County Water Authority is used for irrigation systems. 70% of 70 billion gallons. To promote conservation, the Suffolk County Water Authority requires the odd, even days for people for watering. And the last thing it said there, the agency has no enforcement power and has pushed the East End municipalities like us to pass local ordinances to enforce odd, even watering. And the last thing in this article, which was an eye-opener, were of the 10 leading homeowners that utilize Suffolk County water. Each person in Suffolk County Water Authority uses approximately 150,000 gallons of water per year, according to their sources. In one house in Southampton, I won't mention the address, they use 14.3 million gallons of water, which is, astronomical compared to. The second one is in Sagaponic, 10.4. Next one in Southampton, 8.9. Next one in Southampton, 7.6. Next one in Bridgehampton, 7.5. And they go down from 6 through 10. 9 of the 10 are located right here on the South Fork. The mentality is that there are a lot of people that want green lawns and they don't much care. But you take a look at this statistic.
To put that in perspective, those houses use more than the golf course, our golf course.
They use more than double the whole West Neck water system.
And you are correct. You are correct. That one house.
Yeah.
And it actually has a picture of the home. That's what the house looks like, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd cut that out.
Everything is great. You'd love to cut down.
And the challenge with those homes is they're not price sensitive, so the traditional model of raising rates is really just squeezing people in the middle and not, there's no impact on you.
I think the most important thing to walk away from here is that they have no enforcement, so they can't force things down. But they're asking the municipalities, now we have them on the islands that we need to cooperate better with. But even for people that are not using Suffolk County Water Authority water, the message is all there. I mean, the message is conservation, 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 regardless of, and we're speaking after 3 heavy rains in the past 7 days. But, conservation is very, very, very important.
We've talked about it a few times, but I really like to push looking into the grandfather of irrigations.
Yes, we should do that.
And to be clear though, Jim, it's important that the challenge that they're facing with irrigation use is water delivery more so than water sourcing.
Yes.
They're having trouble moving that volume of water at that surge demand rather than, it's not that there's not enough in the ground, it's that they can't get it out of the ground and downstream fast enough to meet these demands because these uses have exploded in volume. And that's the same challenge on the North Fork, and we don't have that problem here largely because we don't have much irrigation.
Right. Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Amber?
I don't have any committee meetings this week.
Stephen's
Or
been
last
at,
week.
she's been at all of them though.
Yeah, I mean,
She's-
ones that I've been a liaison to.
Stephen?
Nothing this.
Linda, you got anything? Julia, you got anything for us? Bill, you got anything?
I tried something before.
Anybody in the,
Well, did a good job.
Julie, you got anything?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if there's nobody else, I'm gonna make a motion that we adjourn.
No, we have to go into executive
Oh, we do?
contract negotiations.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion, we go into executive session for contract negotiations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.